The president of Korea declares that the world is coming to an end after an asteroid devastates Japan, transforming ordinary people into ravenous, flesh-devouring creatures. The downfall begins, and chaos spreads like wildfire. No one has a clue where to run or what actions to take, except for one man who's strangely more prepared than anyone else. He already owns a secure hideout in an entirely different realm, and he's been itching for the chance to smash a few zombie skulls. That man is the protagonist, Seung-ho. Months earlier, Seung-ho and his group had been playing Sura, the toughest survival game ever created. The gameplay was so brutally exhausting that most players quit altogether. Seung-ho's teammates abandoned him in the worst way possible by never logging in again. He was left to face everything alone while streaming the game, battling countless monsters and rising to the top as the strongest. One day, fed up with how his life was going, our guy pulled off his headset and erased every public stream he had. Seung-ho then shifted focus back to his job as a chef, and even found a charming customer he liked seeing every day. As a joke, he suddenly decided to chant, "Status window in the real world." He nearly jumps out of his skin when an actual blue screen appears before him. The window displays all of his stats, identical to the ones from the game with one notable exception. Trying to test his newfound ability, the young man summons a human-sized warp gate. His thoughts race as he tries to grasp the danger behind this discovery. Because if the game's mechanics were real, then so was the meteor destined to start the apocalypse. While browsing online, Seung-ho frantically stumbles upon an article about the asteroid's incoming strike. He refuses to believe that the events of the game are unfolding in reality. The guy keeps staring at the portal shimmering in front of him. First the asteroid confirmation, now this portal proof that something is horribly wrong. Hesitating, he questions whether he should enter such a thing at all. With no abilities, no romantic prospects, no solid plan and barely any money, he debates stepping through. Ultimately, he reflects for a moment and grabs the nearest ladle he can reach. After scooping some soil, he realizes the environment isn't a labyrinth zone from the game. That's a relief, though he starts wondering if the portal is just transporting him somewhere else on Earth. Once he finishes packing his supplies for the journey, he gives himself the push he needs to step inside. In the following scene, the man passes through the gate and witnesses the stunning landscape beyond. No buildings, no cities, only untouched nature. The first thing he notices is how shockingly cold it is compared to his usual climate. Long story short, the guy is absolutely doomed if he ends up trapped here. Pulling out a marker, he numbers a tree with a 0. Something smart to avoid losing his way during exploration. He begins walking and walking until fatigue starts wearing him down. The forest feels endless with nothing notable in sight. Just when this man was silently begging for something interesting, a creature glares at him from nearby. It leaps toward him like a predator and nearly scares the soul out of our protagonist. Thankfully, it's only a magnificent valley deer, not some nightmare carnivore. The system immediately identifies the creature for him, confirming this realm isn't connected to Earth at all. The deer gazes at him briefly, before sprinting away. Not that he expected it to start a conversation, but still. Even the protagonist thinks it's strange how quickly it fled. At least it wasn't hostile. Still, he knows things will get terrifying if he runs into murderous boars or aggressive monkeys. Another curious detail, valley deer never existed in Sura. From the moment he arrived, he sensed this realm was tied to real survival concepts, not the game's artificial design. Pulling out a blade, he pushes forward, staying alert for anything that might ambush him. Until now, he's been denying the approaching catastrophe threatening humanity. But just as he's about to call it quits, he discovers something. His eyes land on a radiant sun apple, a mystical fruit he plucks from a branch. First, he questions whether it's safe to nibble. Then he takes a bite and feels his body shift instantly. The system notifies him of his stamina recovery, and a golden glow spreads across his body. Its effect perfectly matches the sun apple juice from the game. With yet another undeniable confirmation, the man knows without doubt that disaster is coming. He also realizes he's standing right beside goblin droppings, meaning he needs to tread carefully. Seung-ho exhales shakily, trying to steel his nerves. And despite wanting to deny it, he finally accepts that the end of the world is imminent. After experiencing the portal's effects, he returns to the real world. There, Seung-ho starts brainstorming countermeasures. He refuses to be unprepared when the apocalypse arrives. First, he reviews all his gameplay footage and saves everything onto a personal hard drive. Conveniently, he streamed every session, making the data easy to collect, even though he never imagined needing it like this. News about the asteroid spreads. Japan's destruction is predicted to begin in 32 days, the same moment the apocalypse starts. Until then, he commits to preparing himself, because the game was packed with awful mechanics. The worst was something known as Iron Death Disease. This phenomenon caused every metal object in existence to corrode and collapse. Buildings turned to dust, and this paved the way for zombie swarms within hours. With all metal wiped out, modern civilization plunged back into the Stone Age. Iron Death eventually faded in the game, but the terrifying part was that it lasted a full year. Even so, the incoming Iron Death didn't worry him too much. He had the portal as a guaranteed safe haven thanks to his new trait. Seong-ho strongly believes the disease cannot pass through his gate. After organizing his thoughts, he pours all his savings into premium-grade gear. The man is basically entering a real-life zombie survival match, so he stocks up on equipment and essentials. Checking online forums at night, Seong-ho feels disappointed by how some awakened people abuse their powers for crime or entertainment. When morning arrives, he buys even more supplies for his upcoming mission. On his way back, he even picks up a hunting bow just to be safe. While doing this, a realization hits him. Seong-ho wonders if he's overreacting. Maybe he's jumping ahead of himself and preparing too early. Still, he plans to earn all the money back later, even if he ends up wrong. After finishing his errands, he returns home and hangs a closed sign on his shop. Seong-ho is deep in thought when a familiar voice calls out to him. Temu Chahin from Solo Leveling anxiously asks why the shop is shut. He replies that he's doing some remodeling, which makes her assume he must have made a huge profit. Seong-ho quickly ends the conversation, saying he has things to do. But she suddenly stops him to ask something, yet becomes flustered and never manages to say her actual question. Turning around to leave, Seong-ho is left curious about what she wanted to ask. And although he could have pressed her for an answer, he lets it go and proceeds with his work. Inside, he vows to get serious and focus on what truly matters. The man basically decides to ignore all distractions and lock in. He commands the portal to open while recalling his preferred in-game tactics. Some would label him a strategist, a planner who uses clever approaches to clear every stage. He was never the strongest fighter, he relied mostly on intelligence. The reason is simple: in Sara, gaining stats is complicated. You don't get them from level ups, you earn them through hunting and exploration. Right now, our guy is back in the other realm practicing with a bow. With zero training experience, he relies on YouTube tutorials to learn. Seong-ho positions himself properly and aims for the shot. A version of himself from the game resurfaces as he focuses, then releases the arrow. It whistles through the air and hits the target. The man is stunned by his own skill, briefly believing he might be some chosen prodigy. But with his hand throbbing in pain, Seong-ho realizes his biggest weakness is strength. That's why he plans to work out and build his endurance. With the basics ready, he moves to the next stage. Immediately, he knows he must deal with two tasks. The first is creating a proper plan to hunt monsters effectively. His second objective was to establish a proper base where he could safely stash all his supplies without a shred of worry. Yet right now, he stood there empty-handed, lacking both weapons and provisions, since everything he ordered was still on its way. Until those arrived, he busied himself hunting golden apples, practically giddy every time fortune pushed one into his path. That early groundwork was precisely why he managed to hold out in Sura for as long as he did. As he scanned his surroundings, Xianghao stumbled upon goblin waste. He had been searching for it with a simple purpose in mind. The thing with goblins is that they always love sticking together, so the fact that a single filthy lump of droppings, yes, literally, sat alone told him one goblin lingered nearby. Acting like a full-fledged waste examiner deluxe, he inspected the evidence and concluded that this goblin must be in exile. Seong-ho knew that this outcast could be his breakthrough opportunity. He had to track it down with everything he had. As night settled in, his pursuit of the solitary goblin continued. The nearby howls of wolves signaled he was nearing the valley. Then he finally spotted the exact goblin he had been searching for. Seong-ho ducked behind a tree, though he could clearly see that this creature looked exactly like its counterparts from the game. Goblins were regarded as the lowest-tier monsters, armed only with crude spears and poisonous darts. They were infamous for maiming their victims and delighting in torment. That was the main reason our protagonist opted for a long-range weapon, choosing a bow as his first method of attack. Judging from its appearance, this goblin was old and in miserable shape, and it carried no weapons at all. So without hesitation, Seong-ho pulled out his bow. He knew that if he kept his composure, defeating the creature was within reach. His arrow shot clean through the goblin's arm, piercing straight through. Seong-ho had aimed for its head, but he accepted the outcome. Capitalizing on the moment, he readied a second shot. But the goblin hurled a stone with such force that it knocked the bow right out of his grasp. Seong-ho instantly realized he was facing a seasoned and battle-tested goblin. Both combatants braced themselves, drawing their blades for a close-quarters fight. The grand duel between Sungjin Woo and Beirut. Hold on, wrong tail entirely. Seong-ho gripped his knife and swung, aiming to cut the goblin along its side. The experienced goblin dodged effortlessly and struck the young man's kneecap with a brutal hit. The struggle crashed to the ground as Seong-ho tackled the Go, and in this position, he gained a decisive advantage. Seong-ho drove his blade deep into the creature's chest, forcing a shriek of agony from it. His first kill was complete, earning Seong-ho 2 points. He struggled to believe he had actually pulled it off. Nearby, he found guaca powder and vegetable oil. Within the game, mixing them created a healing ointment. But first, he needed to bury the corpse quickly. Leaving it exposed risked the goblins' group finding it and hunting Seong-ho down. Letting the body decay openly wasn't wise either, as it would transform into something known as a bone creeper. Seong-ho soon spotted a pair of red trouts not far away. Seong-ho's chest tightened as he realized just how doomed he was. The instant he diverted his eyes, he caught sight of a chilling owl-like monster staring straight down at him. Before continuing with this scene, the narration rewinds to Seong-ho's experiences back when he was a player. During his streams, he gathered heaps of material analysis about the game. Some viewers even donated money just to push him into exploring deeper content. But the forest house was home to 2 of the deadliest creatures in the game, werewolves and owl bears. Owl bears were fiercely territorial beings, and their presence maintained balance in the monster ecosystem. Thinking back to those streaming days, Seong-ho felt a small glow of comfort in his chest. There was this one supporter, Bull Sungman, who always cheered him on. Others were relaxed yet quirky, like that barking-obsessed viewer who never stopped typing woof in the chat. Curiously, Seong-ho wondered why those joyful memories were resurfacing now of all times. Was it because he was face-to-face with the embodiment of terror, a beast that could end him in an instant? Seong-ho refused to let panic take control. It was as if those memories were urging him to focus, so he used every second to formulate a plan. He already knew owl bears were brutally savage and shredded anything that stood before them. The fact that this one remained still suggested it wasn't particularly hungry. But another factor gnawed at him, something far more troubling. They had trespassed into the red trout's domain. After weighing every crucial detail, Seong-ho realized there was likely only one escape route from this nightmarish standoff. Turning to flee, he reminded himself that in his mind, he was still the mighty Kimbap Joa, even if his physical body was nothing more than the frail form of Kang Seung-ho. With his jaw clenched, he dares the monster to confront him head-on. It becomes his final proclamation of his determination to stay alive. The beast locks its gaze onto him and unleashes its terrifying opening strike. The owlbear excels at hunting in the darkness, though its major flaw lies in exposure to direct sunlight. Having memorized its patterns from the game, Seong-ho understands that execution alone will determine whether he survives. Matching the rhythm of the beast's assault, Seong-ho slips past the slash with precision, all while plotting a way to produce some form of light to spook the creature. Exploding into motion, he sprints up the monster's massive arm, then abruptly pulls out a flashlight and blasts its vision with a blinding beam. The effect traumatizes even a predator of this caliber, leaving the owlbear completely sightless. The scene then shifts to our protagonist practically decaying in his bed as his alarm blares. He understands he must rise, even though every inch of his body aches horribly after the previous night. Si-hyun-ho had collapsed the moment he made it back home. His final recollection is himself sprinting for survival after temporarily blinding the creature. By pure misfortune, he ended up encountering an owlbear immediately after dealing with a goblin. The young man has zero intention of reliving that nightmare again, so he attempts to stand up and grab something to eat. He crashes face first onto the floor, realizing his legs are obliterated after all that running. Fortunately, he still has those golden apples from the other realm. Seong-ho picks one up and bites into it, instantly replenishing his stamina thanks to its properties. At last, he feels more alive than he has in ages, pondering whether he should properly fill his stomach next. But after freshening himself up, the young man ends up unexpectedly bumping into Temu Chahin again. She's here to eat at a different restaurant and happened to cross paths with him. Seong-ho hadn't been seeking company, but she took the seat anyway since she enjoys having someone to share a meal with. Mikyung immediately asks whether he tried opening the status window. Her eager behavior makes Young-ho realize this must have been the topic she wished to bring up last time, but held herself back from saying. Mikyung shows him an article and insists that the information is legitimate. Certain awakened players are actually using their powers to steal money from others. Seong-ho is mildly surprised by how boldly she asks something like that. He lies, replying that nothing appeared for him. Truth is, Seong-ho believes he's doing the right thing by keeping everyone else unaware of his status. First of all, his trade is strategic rather than combat-centered. It's something he intends to leverage for his own benefit rather than share. At the moment, even his personal safety isn't fully secured. And if he exposes his capabilities to the woman in the red dress, in this case, her things might spiral into danger for him. It's a wise decision, Still, the young man can't help but be curious why Mick Young is so invested in discussing awakenings. Then she surprises him by hesitating and even admitting she said something untrue. Se-young-ho assumes her intentions are good and reassures her she doesn't need to force herself to say anything. He encourages her that she still has time and then heads home once their conversation ends. At long last, his delivery packages arrived. The items he ordered had finally shown up, meaning he no longer had to stress about supplies. He carried everything up to the rooftop and kept only the essentials on the second floor. While preparing, he selected a wide assortment of items required for today's mission. Equipment like gas masks, suits, and other gear. For this mission, the young man plans to locate a proper place to serve as his hideout. Building a home base is necessary, which is exactly why he brought the axe. After passing through the portal, Se-young-ho follows his first lead in searching for a hideout. He had accidentally uncovered a goblin cave when he was previously looking for the older goblin. Remembering its position, he returns to that exact location and finds it again. It's a remarkably convenient hiding spot, perfectly suited for his plans. This is genuinely a discovery worth celebrating, because these creatures pose almost no threat. Se-young-ho already came prepared with a plan for dealing with low-level monsters anyway, so he had nothing to be afraid of. The thing about kobolds is that they're nocturnal beings. Since they're asleep right now, the young man intends to suffocate them inside. First, he chops off several branches and gathers a stack of firewood. Then he arranges the pile right at the entrance. His next step is to drench the entire heap with gasoline. Se-young-ho believed this mission would be a breeze, since all he needed now was to ignite the fire. But then, to his shock, he heard them stir awake. And instantly the creatures fixed their eyes on their upcoming meal. Se-young-ho offers them a calm greeting, before drawing his axe and launching himself into motion. With one clean arc, he slices both monsters at their necks, killing them on the spot. They went down so easily only because they were still groggy from just waking up. Thanks to these back-to-back kills, the system rewards him with a level increase and 4 points. Next, Se-young-ho flicks the lighter into the firewood, and shortly after, the fumes begin seeping inside. In the Sura game, low-rank monsters shared one obvious weakness. They were extremely susceptible to anything unfamiliar, and this was one such tactic. Our guy waited outside with a gas mask on, even though burning them outright was also an option. But this strategy made the cleanup far more manageable. The dozing kobolds panicked awake and bolted outside to survive. Se-young-ho purposely chose this method to weaken them and throw their escape into chaos. As soon as they burst out, his goal was to strike them while their bodies were compromised. Although he expected around 5 to appear, Se-young-ho freezes when only 4 show up. This differs from their usual group of 7. Taking aim at one of the kobolds, the young hunter cuts it down, announcing that only 3 remain. The last 3 sprint toward him, doing whatever little they can to attack. But our man is ready with his axe. He swings that thing like he's hitting home runs and drops them one by one. Another kobold attempts an assault, but the legendary death-grade fart spray blinds it right in the face before it can act. Se-young-ho steps in and severs its head, leaving only one final creature. Our protagonist stares at their trembling leader, quivering in fear. He has become the dominant hunter now and pronounces its end, vowing to make full use of their hideout. The slaughter finally concludes, leaving Se-young-ho collapsed on the ground from exhaustion. His lack of stamina remains his biggest drawback, even against easy foes. Interestingly, the system's stats mirror the game perfectly, including the exhaustion debuff. Even the fact that status points don't increase after leveling is identical. Still, leveling up will eventually open access to shop items, which is useful in itself. For now, the best perk is having a private place he can utilize freely. But even though he wanted the interior spotless, he was immediately disheartened by the disgusting mess left behind by the kobolds. With the hideout secured, the cleaning phase began. The guy had to scoop up so much goblin filth that he nearly lost patience. Scrubbing everything felt like a total nuisance, especially after fighting for his life. Se-young-ho cursed the filthy creatures for living in such garbage. Still, with his new base secured, he had nothing else to stress about. Se-young-ho travels back to his world each time he needs to dump waste. It's convenient, but the cleaning still eats up so much time. What shocks him most is realizing how effortless it is to use items across dimensions. So he grabbed a pipe from one world and activated it in the other, even surprising himself with how flawlessly it functioned. After hours of effort, the hideout finally sparkles with cleanliness. He starts thinking about the challenges of mortar and sandwich panels for construction. But one advantage of this miserable cave is that it's filled with luminous and ignition stones. They're basic beginner materials in the game, but the cave has plenty of them, which is great for him. Se-young-ho now has a good reason to mine the area properly once construction is done. The next morning, the guy feels like he's at death's door. He's been working so relentlessly that every inch of his body throbs. Looking at his arm, he's surprised by the small cuts he didn't realize he'd taken. His collection of items from the other realm sits neatly on the side table. Seong-ho wonders if this might be the perfect moment to try making an ointment. The process itself is straightforward. Just mix the guaca powder and the vegetables in equal portions. After a good stir, the mixture finally comes together. It results in a low-grade healing ointment. Thanks to our boy's background in cooking, the chef within him makes the task far easier. Even just applying the ointment to his arm makes him feel as if he's finally making progress. Still, Seong-ho grows uneasy at the thought that he may need to remake this stuff over and over again. He considers strengthening his stats by working on the basics, yet he's risking his life so often that he might actually end up dead before the apocalypse even arrives. And while that would be darkly comedic, Seong-ho refuses to gamble with his life and starts thinking about using something simpler and safer like a gun. Suddenly, an idea flashes through his mind. There is absolutely something he can make use of. Separate from the game's main storyline lies its background lore. But the real question is whether that lore will even matter once the apocalypse unfolds. Using that knowledge, Seong-ho organizes his thoughts. He silently hopes that the backstory events will come to pass, because if they do, the advantages he'll gain are beyond anything he could imagine. With a fresh plan in place, this guy heads up to the rooftop to grab the construction materials he ordered. Opening the portal gate, our boy begins tossing the bags through to the other side one after another. Once done, he collects a few more items and heads downstairs to the first floor. There, just as he's about to move a stack of packages, that same girl suddenly appears again. Seong-ho starts wondering if she's becoming a little too comfortable around him at this point. He blurts it out directly, leaving her visibly embarrassed. He reassures her that he's simply busy with renovation work, and she seems convinced he's telling the truth. What catches her off guard is the fact that he hasn't come in for his usual 3-month haircut. Seong-ho remembers and admits it, realizing he does need a haircut before his incoming expedition, so he sets aside what he's doing and heads to her shop. There, our boy looks like a Korean version of Moist CR1 Taikael as he tells her to shave it all off. The buzz-cut Sigma transformation. Though surprised, she goes ahead with his request. What surprises her even more is how Seong-ho's shoulders have gotten noticeably broader. Let's be real, though that's not something girls usually say out loud. He simply tells her he's been exercising. Meanwhile, Mikyung talks about the status window being connected to the survival life system of the game. Awakeners are people who have played the game at least once. Throughout the entire conversation, Seong-ho pretends not to know anything and just agrees. But he does casually ask where she got this information. Suddenly, a tattooed guy walks into the shop. He says he's here for the new intel, and hilariously, this is the same guy who once competed against Seong-ho in a singing contest. Our boy is irritated that this clown is the one she relies on for information. The blonde guy explains that a certain someone deleted the streams and keeps all the details to himself. The moment becomes even more awkward when he admits he's trying to dox the player's real location. Seong-ho, now curious, wants to know who this mysterious person is. In-hack casually drops the name Kimbap Joa, Seong-ho's old username. This makes everything worse because now our boy knows people are genuinely out there hunting for him. In-hand pressures the lady to be bold and join their group. Seong-ho finds the entire situation ridiculous. He deleted the videos simply because he was disappointed. He never once thought about any personal gain. Regardless, this punk acts like a know-it-all big shot. He even curses at Seong-ho for abandoning everyone without publicly sharing details of his streams, completely unaware that the very man he's hunting is sitting right in front of him. Seong-ho wonders if the community feels the same. It makes him question whether he should actually change direction and start sharing information. Our boy stands up to confront In-hack directly. He scolds him for ruining his haircut mid-session. In-hack tries to puff himself up and act tough in front of him. But Seong-ho fixes him with a terrifying glare, warning him to scram before he gets humiliated again. Shaken, the punk rushes out as the lady politely sees him off. Mikyung finally feels at ease again. Seeing how distressed she was, our boy asks for her number, only because he's convinced that guy is a genuine clown who might put her in danger. Back home, our boy now looks like a model with his sharp new look. First, he focuses on his username and starts digging through the forum. What he discovers is disturbing. The entire forum is overflowing with insults and curses aimed at him. The hate is non-stop. Until he eventually stumbles upon In-hack's username. The clown even uses a nickname despite having full verification available on the site. His entire user page was overflowing with hateful comments aimed directly at our boy. A purebred hater, a redditor in spirit, body, and soul. But then a strange calm washed over his mind the moment he activated the portal. He spent the next 2 days upgrading his hideout, mining resources, and working on construction. The pickaxe proved incredibly useful. After that, he mixed the mortar with water, carefully smoothing it out day after day. During one of those quiet moments, he found himself staring at the lonely moon above. And suddenly, Seong-ho realized he couldn't keep ignoring this injustice and cruelty. He wasn't some noble champion, nor was he chasing any grand destiny. His only true objective was survival, absolute survival. As long as he stayed alive, he considered it a victory. With that resolve in place, he turned around and nearly jumped. A bone creeper was rattling its way toward him. Seong-ho was already irritated, so he finally had something to unleash his focus on. A violent explosion erupted, swallowing everything in flames. The next time our boy opened his eyes, he was covered in scratches. He had no clue what on earth had just happened. But then the image of the bone creeper resurfaced in his mind. What confused him the most was how he survived an explosion at point-blank range. But there was an explanation. The moment he spotted the bone creeper, Seong-ho already knew the damn thing was about to blow, so he sprinted. Yet the blast still caught up to him, throwing him hard enough to knock him out but not kill him. However, that little escape attempt came with a price. Seong-ho's right side was riddled with sharp fragments. Using what little strength he had left, he summoned the status window for help. The system displayed reduced stats because of his weakened condition. A piercing headache began swallowing his senses, weighing down Seong-ho's mind. With his last drop of energy, he commanded the portal to open. In the next moment, the very first thing he did was treat his wounds. This meant pulling out bone fragments left behind by the creature, each removal sharp, agonizing, and pure torture. The ointment worked its magic, gradually helping to stop the bleeding. After further dressing the injury, he checked his condition again. Eventually, Seong-ho collapsed into unconsciousness. That was all he could endure for the day. When dawn broke the next morning, our boy was back on his feet. He felt like he might die any day at this rate. His first concern was checking if his wounds had healed. So he opened the status window. The system indicated he was fine, which came as a relief. Rising to his feet, he wondered how that bone-headed creature even managed to find him. The forest was enormous, after all, so it wasn't impossible for monsters to suddenly appear from hiding. This pushed him to focus on boosting his perception stat, which would improve his detection abilities. Those increases came from hunting or exploration experience. Another way to increase stats was through equipment or weapons that granted bonuses to their wielders. The issue, Sura was brutally unbalanced as a game, its difficulty absurd. Even securing basic stat-boosting items required fighting monsters far above your level, meaning you had to challenge nightmarish beasts just to get a single weapon. And after defeating monsters, skills could be unlocked too. Stronger monsters dropped them under specific conditions, though not every skill matched every player's build. So now Seong-ho searched for a guaranteed method to acquire stat-boosting items. He decided to revisit the background storyline he'd seen in the game. These events took place before the asteroids struck Earth. Meaning if he could visit those locations early, he might obtain exclusive items before the apocalypse. But that was only a theory, a game theory if you will. Even so, Seong-ho knew he had to fight stronger monsters eventually. He spent the next several hours reading old information, and discovered 3 key locations where those background narratives occurred. The Russian ship, the Hobgoblin, and another one. The Jury Mountain Orc incident, the fastest of the 3. With his next mission in view, our boy picked up his phone and noticed Mikyung calling him at a late hour. In the following scene, the two of them were seated at a cafe. She asked about his condition, wondering why he was wearing a long-sleeved shirt in the middle of a blazing summer. He tries to hide the injuries he's carrying, only to realize that this woman notices far more than she lets on. She assumes he's still shaken by what happened at the shop, but Seong-ho firmly denies that anything is bothering him. Hearing that makes her brighten up a little as she admits how frightened she had been. Seong-ho then brings up how just last winter that same man caused chaos using an illegally modified tow truck, picking fights with people weaker than him. In short, the man is absolute trash. Mikyung is left speechless by the revelation. With no prior information about the guy, she's startled, but he urges her earnestly to avoid him. Seong-ho then straightforwardly asks why she invited him out in the first place. The sweet young lady leans in close to his ear, and confesses that she in fact is an awakened being. Seong-ho can't fathom why she would casually expose such a dangerous secret. Choosing to play along, he teasingly acts jealous that he didn't receive that kind of fortune himself. She feels guilty for deceiving him earlier, but he gently reassures her that it's perfectly fine. As their meeting wraps up, he rises from his seat. Seong-ho is genuinely pleased that she trusted him with something so personal, and he admits that her honesty somehow eases the weight he's been carrying. Before parting ways, he leaves a subtle hint by mentioning his growing interest in the survival life game, already planning to study it more seriously. Returning home, Seong-ho acknowledges that meeting someone with such decent character sincerely made him feel lighter. He checks through various stores and ends up purchasing some seriously cool drones, along with a rental car for smoother navigation. Afterwards, he heads straight to bed to recover for what awaits him the next day. When the next day dawns, as soon as the sky brightens, he immediately begins preparing materials to hunt the orcs. Inside his home base, he crushes and refines ignition stones. These stones must be handled with precision, or a single wrong tap could trigger them prematurely. With that done, he shifts his focus to the luminous stone next. Mining them overwhelms the eyes with their brilliance, but since their value is undeniable, he keeps working through the glare. After grinding both stones down, he mixes them into powder, marking the completion of his mission setup. Then he adds sugar, gasoline, and organic solvents into the blend. The final component is a hardening agent to stabilize the ignition stone mixture. Thanks to his dimensional gate's adaptable coordinates, he sets up a working desk without any hassle. Before departing, he packs all his supplies into the rental car. Fully satisfied with his purchases and the secured equipment, Seung-ho then drives off toward Juri Mountain with the clear intent of hunting down the orcs. He arrives at the Yungseonri campground parking lot just before midnight. He uses the remaining time to run mental simulations and safeguards all of his gear. When the clock finally strikes 12 a.m., he begins his full-scale search. 2 hours pass and the rain worsens, producing a dense mist that makes visibility almost non-existent. He wonders from which part of the earth the orcs emerge, especially since he already checked the entire campground area. He starts thinking that the usual precursor signs just don't happen in reality. But his thoughts are abruptly cut short by a thunderous roar. Heart-pounding, he spins toward the sound and spots a dark, hulking silhouette advancing toward him. He realizes it's an orc, and not just any orc. It's a red-type subspecies which guarantees a skill drop. Kang Seung-ho steadies himself and launches a cracker. If everything goes according to his plan, he's confident he can take it down. His strategy for dealing with orcs is straightforward. First, provoke the creature and draw its aggression toward him. When the orc locks onto the firecracker's blinding flare and starts hacking at it with its axe, that's the moment he aims to seize. He targets the orc and instantly triggers the portal. And at that same instant, he yanks open a flashbang. The burst of light is overwhelmingly intense. It will take roughly 20 seconds before the orc regains its sight, turning everything into a race against time. And within that narrow window, he must destroy the orc's muscles. His aim is to weaken the orc completely by targeting muscles already loosened under its current status effects, forcing its movements to slow to a crawl. The orc bellows in fury and swings its axe straight at him with the intention of crushing him. But with sharp reflexes, he ducks at the exact moment the axe comes down, narrowly avoiding the blow. Then he whips out his knife and drives it into the orc's foot. The instant the blade pierces its foot, the creature roars in agony, collapsing onto its knees. And once their eye levels match orc and protagonist face to face, he shoves the already prepared flame canister straight into its mouth. The moment the canister goes in, it detonates, blasting him backward from the impact. He scrambles to his feet, fully aware that he should never have relaxed his guard so soon. He watches as the orc staggers toward him, its upper body engulfed in flames, but the creature doesn't seem like it can last much longer. Still, he's convinced he might be moments away from getting shredded by it. Then his system chimes in, informing him that he has leveled up to level 3, gained 10 extra points, and unlocked a new skill, Will to Survive. He slowly rises, muttering to himself that this whole ordeal is too much for him to handle. He looks around, wondering where the drop item landed, when a faint glow flickers from his wrist. Glancing down, he realizes the drop is a perception-enhancing watch. He breathes out in relief. It would have been a nightmare searching for it in the pouring rain. He steps closer to the fallen orc, steam rising from its remains, unsure what he should do next. He recalls that the Jirisan orc incident had been placed under strict embargo. Sharing information recklessly could easily make things spiral out of control. Then he remembers what Mikyung told him, that the Awakened are all people who have played the game at least once, which means there are likely thousands who have awakened. And even if only a small percentage are individuals like Owen Hawk, they could dismantle laws and systems for personal gain, plunging everything into chaos. His immediate problem, though, is the corpse. If he leaves it unattended, it'll transform into a bone creeper by tomorrow and start attacking people. A sudden thought hits him. Why hadn't he considered he could turn into a zombie too? Even as an Awakened, he's still vulnerable if spores infect him. Unable to decide on the best course of action, his mind spirals without clarity. He opens the portal while thinking about the handful of people who will survive all of this. Whatever happens, the creature deserves a clean and orderly end. So he begins digging a hole to bury the orc he has slain. Exhaustion kicks in quickly, and he wonders how he's even supposed to drag the orc into the grave. That's when his newly acquired skill, Will to Survive, triggers from his fatigue, pushing him to complete the task without hesitation. With renewed force, he gets back to work, finishing the job at a much faster pace. He has no choice now but to push himself as quickly as he can. When the pit is ready, he tosses the orc's body inside, grateful for the skill that helped. Afterward, he opens the portal and ends up landing inside a moving car. The aftereffects strain his body, and he needs time to recover before returning to normal movement. The next morning arrives. He wakes up questioning whether the weather he's seeing is actually real. According to his plan, he should have already established a defensive line by now. He checks his phone, curious whether the remnants of the red orc have all vanished. For today, he decides not to initiate anything. It simply isn't the right moment, so he chooses instead to inspect the items delivered earlier that morning. Inside the package lies every weapon he needs, even if for now he can only wield them like makeshift Indian war clubs. Still, a few items from his order are noticeably missing. He picks up a note explaining that several items he requested are illegal, and customs couldn't let them through. While examining the weapons he did receive, he hears another delivery van arrive. He loudly calls out, telling them to just leave the package at his door. A knock follows moments later, leaving him confused as to why the delivery person ignored his instruction. He repeats his instruction once more, then opens the gate. But instead of a delivery driver, it's Mikyung standing there. She explains they haven't seen each other in quite some time, and she wanted to talk about something important. She's holding a small bag filled with food, and casually asks if he'd like to share some robaki with her. Our boy can't quite believe that Mikyung has actually come all the way to his house. He's obviously flustered, cheeks heating up with nerves he can't hide. After plating the food, she tells him to eat before it gets cold, and he obediently follows her instructions. Once they finish their meal, he asks what she wanted to discuss. She jumps straight into the subject. Since he mentioned he was researching Sura, she figured they should go over some important information together. That isn't at all what he imagined. He briefly hoped she might be here to talk about dating. But he convinces himself that discussing apocalyptic matters with her is definitely the wiser choice, especially since he needs reliable people by his side during harsh times. She quickly gathers the trash while he prepares a few more things. He boots up his computer and even admits to her that he's awakened, deciding it's better she hears it directly than discovering it some other way. He begins by explaining the metal death plague in detail, and how traveling with groups larger than 6 makes them easy prey for zombies. Perceiving that threat is crucial for survival, which makes that skill the most essential of all. He moves on, ready to elaborate about the true objective of the game, survival. But she interrupts, bringing up Owen Hawk complaining about Kimba Plover facing backlash. Why isn't he revealing more information? Our boy doesn't really have a concrete answer, so he suggests she take a guess. She assumes everyone has their own reasons, and their circumstances justify their choices. Then he tells her he declined Owen Hawk's offer to join him, leaving her puzzled as to why. So he pulls out his phone to show her the explanation. It's a recording of Owen and his group discussing kidnapping a girl because she was playing hard to get. He turns to Mikyung and says that when the apocalypse begins, people's true nature will come to light. He urges her not to trust anyone blindly, but she surprises him by suggesting they form a party together. At that, he clenches his fist, unable to give a straightforward response, because one of his priorities is reaching level 10 and unlocking the shot before the tutorial, which complicates everything. In Seola, monster respawn ranks scale according to the player's level. If she accompanied him, she'd be walking straight into a death sentence. He laughs nervously and jokingly asks what she'd do if he turned into a zombie. She insists she'd be fine, then uses her trait to teleport onto his dining table. She proudly demonstrates her trait, Blink, saying she only needs to dodge him if he tries to bite her. He's impressed but warns her not to show that skill carelessly. She responds that she trusts him. With a bright smile, she says they'll make a group together. A team, as long as they don't turn into zombies. Sometime later, he stands beside the trees, reflecting on how surprisingly simple it was to build fences. The first step was hammering the support posts into the ground. Then he wrapped barbed wire around them and secured everything firmly. After that, he installed infrared sensors in a couple of spots and wrapped up the task. Looking at the work he'd done, he praises himself, thinking he deserves at least 1 dexterity point for that. Xiang Hao heads back, completing the mortar work and raising a defensive wall. Then he starts hauling packages. After some time, he finishes transporting all the boxes. While he evaluates what tasks come next, suddenly a chill runs over him and he sneezes. He realizes that the other world is going to be freezing, and eventually he'll have to seek shelter here. So he needs to prepare countermeasures in advance. Our hero glances toward the cave entrance and decides he needs to build a proper gate. Just hanging a curtain won't cut it. With every new step, his to-do list only keeps growing longer. He later swings by a woodworking shop to handle some production work and pick up various supplies he needs. On his way back, he surveys the spots he plans to raid during the 5-hour window before the metal death plague begins to spread. As he compiles the list, he is suddenly approached by Hyun Jun Hyun, someone he hasn't crossed paths with in quite a long while. The man is a gym director, divorced, and raising a very young daughter. Our boy reads his expression, and it's clear something is weighing heavily on him. Young isn't particularly invested, yet his gaze drifts to Hyun's physique, which looks like it's slowly returning to form. Then our boy casually asks what's going on, and Hyun fires back that it should be obvious. He's distressed because the world is about to end. The protagonist is taken aback that he's aware of it as well, and Hyun asks whether our protagonist truly believes it. At first, Hyun himself dismissed it completely. That changed only after his friend suddenly began floating in midair, using the mysterious power he had awakened. The protagonist lies that he hasn't awakened at all, and the gym director sighs gloomily that he hasn't awakened either. Now his friend has headed to a broadcasting station, hoping to earn some money through his newfound ability. The gym guy gestures for our boy to sit down next to him, and our guy starts realizing that it won't be long before everyone discovers the existence of the awakened. Hyun then shifts the conversation to a bizarre event. The Uido shootout. Si Young-ho can't believe what he's hearing, especially since he skipped the morning news. Hyun urges him to go check the news. He tries to look it up, but the post gets deleted almost instantly. The media is clearly being censored. Hyun goes on to explain the follow-up. The authorities tried to mask the incident by claiming the shooter was a deserter. The entire site has now been sealed off from civilians, with only the military and police allowed near it. Abruptly, our boy stands up. He throws out a flimsy excuse to leave and immediately bolts away. Back home, he recalls how the shootout erupted right after the orc incident. All of it pushes him to suspect the government is involved, especially since their reaction practically exposed them. He opens a file on his computer, then he clicks on a video, and our guy is stunned by how many people somehow know the exact timing of the precursor phenomenon. He even eliminated the orc, yet the shootout still broke out at the same time. Lost in thought, he wonders whether someone leaked information to the government ahead of time. And maybe that person initiated the sequence, starting from the first precursor phenomenon. Perhaps they didn't reveal themselves publicly because they lacked any offensive ability. He doesn't know who it is, but he's certain someone is pulling strings from behind the government. Seung-ho asks himself who that hidden figure could possibly be. He digs deeper and eventually narrows it down to 3 veteran players. After wrestling with the possibilities, he rules out the creator. Since someone is reenacting game mechanics in the real world, the game's creators are more likely to be the villains. And if those villains were truly backed by the government, they would never have allowed him to kill the orc. He sketches out 3 faces, the leading suspects, and wonders if the culprit is survivor number 1. And if his theory holds up, he won't need to personally hand this information over to the government. Our guy leans back in his chair, wondering if survivor number 1 is really the person he once knew. He finds himself missing his veteran comrades and chooses to trust them for now. Besides, sharing the information wouldn't stop the catastrophe that's coming, so he decides not to intervene yet. 2 days later, he receives his dormitory unit, and with his pantry stocked, his first shelter is officially complete. He then installs 2 logistic trays and begins drilling through the wall. But the available space is far more limited than he imagined. The basement waterproofing is finished, and he keeps working on the area piece by piece. He steps away, figuring he'll reassess once everything settles during Phase 2. There's a crucial task waiting for him, creating detailed maps with his drone. And while he's in the middle of that task, with his VR equipment secured and the drone gliding high above, he identifies the shelter positioned at the midpoint and begins examining every part of the terrain. Through the drone's viewpoint, he picks up information about the vast snowy fields spread across the northwest. And he also detects an ocean lying to the south. The waters show no sign of monsters and are filled with potential prey, prompting him to prepare several traps for fishing. He takes his time analyzing the valley, aiming to understand the ecosystem surrounding the shelter. That's when he notices the very spot where he buried the owlbear, yet the body has completely disappeared. He briefly considers whether that huge fur-covered brute might have devoured the corpse. Still, he avoids jumping to conclusions, as countless footprints have been stamped into the earth nearby. He measures the stretch between the valley and the shelter, approximately 1.5 kilometers, which tells him the shelter is far more exposed and at risk than he had originally expected. Aware that goblins are active in the area, he immediately summons the drone back, unwilling to risk losing such an essential tool. Even so, he manages to outline a reliable map and identify the variety of creatures living within the forest. His next task is to investigate each of those spots in person. He begins with the closest swamp, hoping to determine if cultivating anything there would be feasible. All at once, the infrared detector lights up, and he steps outside, fully conscious that the tracks out there belong to goblins on the move. This man had already anticipated this moment, making the situation line up perfectly with his expectations. He questions whether this sharpened awareness stems from the recent increase in his perception stat. Even the softest sound slices through the air as if amplified. After observing for a while, he is able to spot multiple goblins without revealing himself, giving him a flawless angle for an ambush. He readies his spear and arrow, then releases a precise, fatal shot directly into a goblin's head. The creature collapses on the spot, and the rest of the goblins respond instantly, supporting one another as they surge toward him in an attempt to overwhelm him. But he cuts them down with swift, merciless efficiency, as though they posed no threat at all. He eliminates 4, then proceeds to finish off the remaining 4. Our guy ends up surrounded, yet he reaches into his pocket and retrieves an item that instantly forces the goblins to buckle, completely overpowered. The protagonist wastes no time, draws his blade, and executes them one by one. He takes full advantage of their depleted stamina, impressed that his strategy worked so effectively. Now the countdown to the apocalypse has narrowed to 21 days. While digging through the soil, fatigue slowly presses down on him. But his trait suddenly triggers, restoring his body to peak efficiency once more. He comes to understand that this ability isn't nearly as useless as he once assumed. After a stretch of labor, he completes the burial of the goblin corpses, then shifts his focus to the spoils he collected. He first takes the guaca fruit, an item incredibly valuable for replenishing strength. Among the loot is an unusually large supply of vegetable oil, leading him to suspect a nearby cultivation point. He then inspects the head goblin's pouch, and is stunned to find a living toad, a blue one no less, leaving this man wondering why they chose to carry a live toad instead of a dead one. And before long, he deduces that it serves as the goblin's source of paralysis toxin. Without hesitation, our boy decides he absolutely must raise this toad. Not only does he find the little creature ridiculously adorable, but by extracting its toxin, he can build poison resistance by injecting controlled doses into himself. With access to paralysis poison, hunting will become significantly easier as well. So our boy names the toad Jadok, determined to feed Jadok plenty and keep him healthy. His system instantly alerts him that the toad is now registered as his property. He questions whether this is some sort of hidden feature implemented into reality, and he begins spiraling into layers of overthinking about it. Afterward, he resumes exploring and opens the dimensional gate. Using that gate, he moves back and forth repeatedly until finally completing all of his reorganizing. Once done, he immediately begins inspecting the nearby surroundings. That's when he discovers a spring he completely overlooked while using the drone. He studies the water and realizes it's just normal water, nothing dangerous. But what shocks him is finding a hideout located near his shelter. And right behind the spring, he discovers a guaca tree along with budding vegetable oil plants. Our boy picks the guaca fruit, and he gathers a proper amount of those vegetable oil buds. After that, he leaves marks on trees everywhere he walks, so he won't lose his way back, then begins heading home. At his apartment, he feeds his new pet Jadok. For now, he's raising the little guy on the second floor of the apartment. He couldn't leave Jadok in the hideout. The toad would die without protection. Beyond caring for his new pet, he has several tasks piling up. The biggest one is making ointment, and he accidentally makes far too much of it. He has no idea what to do with the excess. He can't give it to Mikayung since she's also an awakener. So he decides Hyun should have it instead. At Hyun's place, Hyun drinks his protein shake, and our boy hands him the ointment, making Hyun curious about what it's for. Our guy explains he simply bought too much of it, and it's supposed to work well for injuries. Young jokes, asking if he's suddenly trying to start a business, which our hero denies immediately. Still, Hyun appreciates both the ointment and the Sura-related information he received. But our boy is the one who thanks Hyun for informing him about the shooting incident. Then Xiang-ho comments on how unusually quiet the gym feels, and his friend explains that everyone left to make plans after the broadcasting guy leaked everything he knew. Now they're planning to build a base there. Our hero warns him that gathering too many people is risky. But Hyun refuses to abandon his members. His loyalty to them runs too deep. Hyun then asks what Seung-ho intends to do, but he brushes the question aside. Suddenly, a scream rings out, a scream Xiang-ho instantly recognizes. He looks down from the building and sees Mi-kyung collapsed on the ground. Both men rush toward her, desperate to understand what happened. She explains she was attacked but couldn't see who struck her. Hyun immediately heads outside to inspect the building and its surroundings, even though our boy tries to stop him from stepping out just yet. Meanwhile, our boy stays by Mi-kyung's side, She elaborates that everything went dark before her eyes, and she couldn't comprehend what occurred. He urges her to use her blink ability the instant something like that happens again, because the enemy has started moving. He also promises to send her a self-defense kit soon and tells her to be extremely careful from now on. Only 20 days remain until the apocalypse arrives. There's a well-known meme from long ago: when 5 people gather, one is guaranteed to be useless. Trolls exist everywhere, and Sura is no exception. In Sura, interference patches exist. Developers reply to reports but never actually catch the trolls. Trolls join parties acting like normal teammates in Sura, but later, they deliberately lure the party into monster-infested zones to wipe the entire group. They approach beginners with kindness, only to murder them afterward and steal their belongings. Trolls have done everything imaginable to provoke conflict between parties. They ruined the game, which wasn't popular to begin with, in less than a year, and only because Si Hyun-ho's team eliminated the remaining trolls. Our boy wonders why he's even explaining all this aloud, then sums up what he's learned so far. The Awakena community has united after the Uido shooting incident. They're not just sharing information, they're also scheming. He freezes mid-sentence when he discovers people are selling his videos too. As our protagonist scrolls deeper through the site, he learns that his former teammate Dewojsum was actually a troll. He's stunned when he sees Dewojsum's video thumbnail bragging about being carried by Kimbap Chow. Now Xiang-ho wonders if that troll is trying to bait people using a heavily edited video. Strangely enough, he even claps for Dewojsum, amused that the troll is being praised for his creativity. He stretches, deciding it's time to train. He plans to strengthen himself further to handle people like that. Over the next 13 days, whenever he gets the chance, our hero studies weapon usage and real combat techniques from a survival MeTube channel online. Meanwhile, during that same stretch of time, he witnesses monsters attacking, hideouts included, and he learns of strategies and weapons that never accounted for the wire disease. Therefore, after 13 days of training, Xiang-ho finally looks forward to choosing a main weapon, one that works even under wire disease conditions and excels in both anti-personnel combat and monster elimination. He checks his tool bag and finds an Indian war club, a wooden slingshot, ochre clay beads, and a handmade stone axe, but none of them meet his criteria. Initially, our protagonist decides to try the slingshot. It offers good versatility in many situations. However, the ochre clay beads are questionable in power, being too weak. Next, he considers the Indian War Club. He notes that once wire disease becomes a given, there's no need to overthink. Zombies can be dealt with simply by crushing the spores inside their skulls with a blunt weapon. He remembers that the first item he planned to purchase upon reaching level 10 was a blunt weapon, the Ebony Wood Club, which is why raising his proficiency in blunt weapons feels essential. But now our boy questions whether the Indian War Club is effective against people too. He concludes it's uncertain, especially since it would be difficult to fight a psychic awakener using it. He's fully aware that in survival life, killing another human grants 50 points. It activates the murderer system, a mechanic that forces deathmatches with nearby players once someone is registered as a murderer. This system prevents abuse of player killing. Even so, plenty of players would still eliminate others just for more points, even if they suffer the demerits. Meanwhile, he completely smashes the training dummy using the Indian War Club. He decides to avoid such types of players until he finishes farming items and skills. After intense training, our hero wipes the sweat off while planning to dismantle the store entirely, but he halts mid-thought as he hears a wolf's howl nearby. He stiffens, shocked, wondering if one of them wandered close to his hideout wounded. Eventually, Seong-ho locates the wolf. It's far larger than any normal one, big enough for him to ride. The system identifies it as a gray wolf, but upon closer inspection, he realizes it isn't breathing. He wonders whether this wolf was a stray or if it approached his hideout after being attacked. To understand more, he starts examining its wounds. But suddenly, a young wolf pup slams into his back. Seong-ho realizes the dead wolf is the pup's mother, and the little one positions itself between him and her, trying to protect her. He finds himself conflicted because he can't bring himself to forcefully separate the pup from its mother. He grips a shovel, deciding he needs to bury the dead wolf quickly. As he digs, he thinks that if the wolf was classified as a monster, it would turn into a bone creeper, and if it wasn't, its corpse would attract other monsters. After some time, the hole is finished. The pup sleeps beside its mother. This reminds our boy of his younger self and Menki, the dog he raised as a child. Then he gently picks up the pup and explains that its mother will rest here, adding that it can visit her whenever it wants. He even plans to make a small pet door on the hideout entrance. Next, Seong-ho gives the pup a piece of meat, promising that it will never go hungry as it grows. In return, he asks for its help with its incredible sense of smell. When he asks if it agrees, the little wolf responds with a soft, cheerful sound. Our protagonist names it Dingo, giving the pup a gentle pat on the head. And from that moment, the gray wolf dingo becomes registered as his property. 19 days remain until the apocalypse. Xing Hao spends his time training Dingo. He orders it to repeat the actions he demonstrates. When he asks for a paw, Dingo places it neatly onto his hand, then runs exactly as instructed. It sits, lies down and stays, and it obeys every command without hesitation. Finally, he tosses a large bone high into the air. Dingo leaps and catches it perfectly. Our boy feels proud, noting how fast it learns, likely because it originates from another world. He reflects on Dingo's stellar tracking ability and considers the pup a stroke of fortune, a genuine blessing. He gives his adorable companion a fond kiss and begins to say something. But his phone rings. Seung-ho picks it up. It's a message from Hyun, suggesting he search up levitation online. Later, our hero reads an article about someone hailed as the first superhuman, claiming zombies and monsters will soon emerge and bring catastrophe. The article is now ranked number 1. The comments section is filled with skepticism, people assuming the broadcast station did it purely for views. He notices countless people have no understanding of eras at all. Yet the awakeners in the comments are clearly on edge. He finds it amusing. Some people get angry when too little information is revealed. Others get upset when too much becomes public. He then wonders what the government will do about all this. He knows rallies are being held by people in shock over the mention of superpowers. But he shakes the thought off, deciding not to involve himself, though he knows the government will take action once the second omen. The Hobgoblin event unfolds. Seung-ho refuses to waste any time. He tells Dingo that starting today, they will begin reconnaissance. Deep down, he knows only thorough preparation will save them. And Dingo looks more than ready for what's coming. Later, they step into the portal world together. And Seung-ho takes a moment to reflect on why he chose to conduct interdimensional exploration with Dingo. He lets the wolf sniff a small pouch and instructs it to track it down. The first purpose behind this exploration is to prepare for the approaching Hobgoblin event, since he needs Dingo to firmly imprint the scent of goblins. Meanwhile, Dingo barks, having located the flesh hidden in the bushes, and the protagonist feels genuinely proud that it managed to trace it from nothing more than a faint scent. The second goal is to evaluate whether Dingo can maintain composure during real combat and follow orders. So he gives a signal and the wolf instantly charges forward. Moving with striking accuracy, Dingo catches a rabbit out on the grass, and the protagonist praises it warmly. The third goal of this whole exploration is to determine whether hunting is actually feasible in the other world. Seung-ho walks over to Dingo to examine the catch, observing the dead rabbit and noting its powerful claws and its surprisingly large size. Afterwards, the man and his young wolf resume their exploration. As they move on, he wonders what Dingo's cognitive ability would look like if expressed as stats. And he decides to head toward the valley to confirm it himself. Remembering that his own health stat as Kimbafo was 170, the protagonist is impressed by how quickly Dingo is developing. Suddenly, Dingo starts coughing, and he rushes over to offer it some water, reminding his partner not to wander off into the woods alone. Dingo drinks while the protagonist notices a large green pepper nearby and wonders if that's what it ate. The system identifies it as bull pepper. Seung-ho is pleased to find it in the forest and praises Dingo again. Promising plenty of treats later, he digs into the soil to harvest the bull pepper. Next, they begin their final hunt. Both of them sit atop rocks by the edge of a stream. This time, Dingo senses no strange presence nearby. Deep inside, the protagonist reflects that red trout aren't monsters and don't provide points or items. Yet he still believes that letting young Dingo gain experience is valuable. After completing a hunt for red trout, the protagonist decides it's time to wrap up preparations for Phase 2 and then head home. The next day, he finds his entire restaurant reduced to rubble. The manager of the demolition crew tells him to contact them within 3 days if any repair issues arise. He thanks the manager sincerely for starting work so early. Taking in a deep breath, he feels a slight pang of sadness at the sight of its destruction, but he knows it had to be done. As he steps inside, Seung-ho assumes that after the apocalypse, those who don't turn into zombies will probably loot stores. He admits he would do the same, so he has no grounds to complain. As he begins cleaning, Hyun appears behind him. Surveying the empty room, Hyun mentions he also left only the bare minimum equipment behind, when the protagonist wonders why Hyun is even there. Hyun flicks his fingers against Young-ho's forehead, irritated that he disappeared the previous day without a word. Now, Hyun says he came just to make sure he was still alive. Meanwhile, Dingo watches Hyun with a cold, wary gaze. Hyun asks whether Seung-ho always had a dog, but he clarifies that his old one has long passed. He adds that this wolf is his new companion. And Hyun calls the wolf adorable. Then Seong-ho asks again why he's here, and Hyun repeats that he simply came to check on him. The protagonist doesn't buy it, so Hyun finally shares another reason for his visit, and reveals that he has identified the people responsible for the attack on Mikaeung. With that, only 17 days remain until the apocalypse arrives. Sitting down with Hyun, Seong-ho learns that the gathering organized by Kim Ki-aljun, the man known for never removing his hat, is actually targeting Mikaeung. Hyun also mentions that the tow truck which the protagonist dislikes is tied to their group as well. He points toward the mountains before them and asks if the area near the mountain's base is where redevelopment stalled, noting that their hideout is located there. However, the protagonist wonders how Hyun managed to uncover all this, and Hyun explains that the clues simply aligned. He also mentions that Han Jin-seong, the man who can levitate, recently appeared on a variety show, and Hyun directly asked him about it. Han Jin revealed he had met Kyung's group before but found every one of them unpleasant. So Han Jin refused to stay with them due to conflicting personalities. After the incident with Mikaeung, all the female members began leaving the party. When questioned about why they left, those women only explained they had received offers from other Awakener groups. Hyun asks for Seong-ho's thoughts, and the protagonist responds that unlike Mikaeung, the other female members were probably tricked into joining. Hyun then suddenly reveals that their party has now dwindled to just 4 members, including himself. This revelation shocks the protagonist, who recalls there being 20 members only days earlier. Hyun doesn't go into further detail, but he understands that their party now has only 2 Awakeners left. Seong-he struggles to process this, remembering all the favors they had done for those members who still chose to walk away. Even so, Hyun remains steady, telling the protagonist that this is simply how people are, they were only looking out for themselves. More than that, Hyun admits he's worried about little Jae-yoon and is debating whether he should contact his ex-wife. The man beside him keeps a neutral expression, fully aware that their situations aren't the same. And he wants to know whether his own thoughts are right. There's something he wants to ask Jung that has been bothering him. The protagonist wonders aloud if the apocalypse really arrives and people begin threatening Hyun, what would he do? Before he can finish, Hyun cuts him off, stating without hesitation that he would kill them. Jung says he has a personal rule about not harming others, but in a lawless disaster there would be no choice. He believes that in such moments, evil simply has no room to survive. Then Hyun curiously asks why Seo Young-ho would ask such a question, pointing out that it doesn't sound like him at all. The protagonist gives no real answer. And at that moment, someone screams for help. The sound comes from the protagonist's phone. Hyun wonders if it might be a child in trouble. He asks Hyun to watch over Dingo for a bit. Meanwhile, Mikaeung is cornered by thugs and has apparently sent out a distress signal. The enforcer tow truck On and Hawk mock her, demanding that she come down and stop making a scene. In response, Mikaeung stands at the edge of a rooftop, shouting that she already refused them, yet they kept chasing her. She demands to know why they're doing this. On urges her to reconsider, but Kim Shiol and Majung step forward, insisting they should handle things their way, adding that since this is a redevelopment zone, no one will come to save Mikaeung. Kim Chio tells her not to waste her breath and reminds her that they all possess traits. Then begins a countdown. Meanwhile, the protagonist is preparing his weapons hidden in an alley. At the count of 2, he slings Kim Ki-al, and on 3, Kim Ki-al is struck. The whole group is stunned, scrambling to figure out who is attacking them. Suddenly, the protagonist appears wearing a helmet and steps forward to land a blow on. Debating for a moment whether he should reveal his identity. Using the Indian War Club, Seong-ho strikes On with overwhelming force. Then immediately goes after another member. This man releases a cloud of black energy, making the protagonist suspect he possesses a vision-blocking trait. But Seong-ho manages to hit him regardless. Now the protagonist is panting heavily, and when he spots Mikaeung, she warns him to be careful. He turns to see Kim Shil charging at him with a bat, which connects and cracks his helmet. Seong-ho is stunned by the sheer force behind the hit. At the same time, Kim Cheol realizes who he is. But the protagonist is lost in thought, understanding that Kim Cheol's offensive trait is frighteningly strong, even at an early stage. Kim Cheol swears he'll cripple him, and his group rises to support him, determined to unleash every ounce of strength they have, even though none of them are Awakeners. On-in charges at the protagonist with electricity surging, taunting him as he closes in. Seong-ho is unsure how to respond as his opponent flaunts every ability he has, and he wonders if he should activate the dimensional gate. Just as On-in is about to strike, Dingo suddenly appears and bites into On-in's arm. Hyun steps out from another alley, asking whether this kind of behavior is really acceptable in broad daylight, and suggests they should leave if they don't want trouble, saying he's about to call 112. The entire group decides to retreat for now. Hyun comments that they act arrogantly despite being so weak. Next, Mikyung climbs down and immediately grabs the protagonist's head, checking whether he's alright. She notices the cracks in his helmet, and Hyun offers to carry him on his back. Seeing both of them worried, Seung-ho's mind flashes back to his old comrades from the game. When Mikyung suggests going to the hospital, the protagonist turns away and insists he's fine. He then asks Hyun whether they can bring Mikyung into their party. Hyun says it's fine as long as she's willing, and she happily agrees. The hero excuses himself, saying he has things he needs to take care of, while Hyun and Mikyung are left wondering why he's acting so differently. After returning home, the protagonist focuses on steadying his emotions and mapping out the second phase of his preparations. His sudden departure had been unavoidable, and watching Hyun and Mikyung together made him feel he could trust them with the truth about his abilities. But the decision had already been made. To fully capitalize on the dimensional gate, he must level up quickly and devote himself to acquiring skills and farming. The phrase crushed them with item power echoes even louder in his mind after the confrontation with the mountain gang. He realizes that if he continues preparing for the apocalypse as planned, there will end up being a level gap of at least 3, causing monsters that respawn near him to become stronger and making it more difficult to work alongside his 2 companions. He keeps working until he finishes installing a wood-burning stove in his hideout, knowing it will help him sleep peacefully at night. Dingo enjoys the warmth as well, dozing comfortably beside it. Now the protagonist has only a few more components left to install when they arrive, and the initial setup of his hideout will be nearly complete. Determined, he decides to pull an all-nighter. With that, 16 days remain until the apocalypse arrives. A news anchor appears, updating viewers on the asteroid previously detected. According to the report, the HSA has announced that Yoonjombi has entered the midpoint of the solar system. HSA continues to monitor its trajectory closely, but the meteorite has split under Jupiter's gravitational pull. In response, the head of the Meteorite Observation Department, Thomas Chandler, informs the public that the 2 fragments, unjammed by Alpha and Beta, have no chance of approaching Earth. However, Seung-ho remembers clearly that on D5, just 5 days before the apocalypse, Yoonjombi Beta fell first. It crashed near a Russian ship out at sea, and the resulting tsunami swept that ship ashore at Gamcheon port, which became the origin point for Korea's first zombies. The news anchor continues with an update on the Udo shooting incident. President Jang Won-taek has not left his residence for an entire week, prompting leaders of the opposition party to release a joint statement agreeing to hold a hearing. Some people are now claiming this is connected to rumors about awakeners and the looming catastrophe. Hearing this, the protagonist admits to himself that the world really is ending. He thinks it's fortunate that the media has finally begun paying attention, and concludes that this will make it harder for awakeners to get away with crimes now. Next, he decides to check the community reactions on his laptop. As he scrolls through the comment section, he sees that people are posting fierce opinions about the situation. By coincidence, he spots a comment from My Dream and wonders if that person has been active this whole time. My Dream had been a player known for helping beginners, and Seung-ho's group had teamed up with him a few times. My Dream's goal was to build a bunker, and if the protagonist didn't possess a portal, he might have been tempted to join him. He decides not to enter any contract unless his veteran friends join My Dream as well. But he bookmarks My Dream's comment to return to later. After shutting his laptop, the protagonist looks forward to constructing his second shelter. The next day, Hyun-ho stands before his hideout and realizes that pulling 2 all-nighters is actually possible. He feels drained, but seeing the finished exterior fills him with new energy. Now it's time to figure out how to use the electricity generated by his solar panels. In simple terms, several wiring steps are needed to make the energy compatible with his electronics. Fortunately, when he plugs in his phone, it charges. He lifts his arms in celebration, declaring that he has now built the foundation for survival in this world. For the first time in a while, he feels a surge of dopamine. Yesterday, he also gathered luminous stones and ignition stones. And after digging deeper, he discovered a mineral harder and sharper than obsidian called Emerus. Although it currently serves no purpose, he still considers it better than having nothing. He plans to install LED lights later, but before he sleeps, he needs to organize the food supplies stored in the basement. Suddenly, a loud noise from Dingo snaps his attention. He rushes outside. Seung-ho finally spots Dingo, standing firm against a group of maned wolves, a species of monster he immediately recognizes from Sora. He can't help but question why these beasts, which typically inhabit high-altitude regions, would appear in a place like this. Watching the fury burning in Dingo's eyes, The protagonist begins to suspect that these might be the very wolves responsible for the death of Dingo's mother. He attempts to soothe Dingo, yet deep down he understands that he isn't capable of bringing down the entire pack right now. If he tries to retrieve a stronger weapon, he risks exposing his back, an opening that could easily cost him his life. So he resolves to drive away the alpha wolf first, knowing full well that once the leader withdraws, the rest will inevitably follow. He notes the alpha's hypervigilant movements, and how the rest of the pack only advances after their leader makes the first move. He then weighs the possibility of them launching a coordinated attack. He also observes just how sensitive these wolves are to different scents. Luckily, Seung-ho still has a can of pepper spray on him. If he can manage to get it on the alpha, he'll be able to force it away from the shelter. Beads of sweat slide down his cheeks as he visualizes the risk of being mauled before he even gets the chance to act. He wonders whether he could create a distraction long enough to land the spray. Suddenly, a plan sparks in his mind, and he's convinced it could realistically work. Determined to protect the hideout he built with his own hands, this man steals his resolve. He hurls a knife straight at the alpha, but the creature slips out of its path with ease. The alpha then lunges forward at him, and just as it closes the distance, Seung-ho snaps open the portal, and in that crucial instant, he unleashes the pepper spray. The alpha staggers, completely thrown off balance, and in that moment of confusion, the protagonist drives his blade deep into its eye. With their leader defeated, the wolf pack retreats into the wilderness. Our hero collapses onto the ground, shaken after brushing so close to death. Dingo approaches and begins tending to him, and Seung-ho gently pats Dingo's head in gratitude. He vows to Dingo that he will avenge